So how you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great.
Good. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Staying away from the corona.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. How are you all, how are you all making that out down there in Florida?
Good,
Kind of
good.
crazy down there.
It
Yeah,
is, yeah.
cases are starting to level out, but I mean, yeah, it got pretty crazy for a while. We
Well,
got
it's
kind of
crazy up here too.
yeah. Where are you? You're from Nashville or
I'm not from there. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is
Maryland?
about 15 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. Originally, I'm from Chicago.
Oh, okay. All right. Very cool. How'd you get into Chicago?
Well, I got into Chicago because my dad was he was one of the first Black Secret Service agents,
Oh, cool.
Oh,
and his assignment was in Chicago at the time when I was born. But we moved around quite a bit, and then he joined the Foreign Service, and we moved all over the world.
What were like specific things that he had to do in the Foreign Service? Not
The
familiar.
Foreign Service or Secret Service?
Oh, the Foreign Service.
Yeah, okay. He was the cultural attaché, the public affairs officer. Right, he was a guy right under the ambassador in the embassy.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. Oh, yeah. What cool places do you live at?
Well, I've been between traveling as a child, starting at the age of 3, with my folks, in the Foreign Service,
Yes.
and traveling now as an adult musician performing around the world. I've been in a total of 57 different countries on 6 continents.
Oh my goodness.
But I've lived in Africa, I've lived in Europe, and visited many countries on other continents.
You are a worldly man. This is crazy. Well, I mean, I guess it probably helps you out in your line of work, I would assume.
Yeah, it does. It does, And I tell you, no matter how far I've gone from this country to the other side of the earth or right next door, it doesn't matter. At the end, I've met all kinds of different people, different cultures, religions, etc. At the end of the day, I come to one conclusion each time, that no matter how far I've gone or who I've met, we all are human beings.
Yes, sir.
And we all want basically 4 things. We want to be loved, we want to be respected, we want to be heard, and we want the same things for our family as anybody else wants for their family.
I couldn't agree with you more. That sounds amazing. I wish it was more prominent in today's society, or I think we're getting there eventually, but
yeah,
slow burn.
yeah. But slow burns last longer though.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Man. Well, getting into like your traveling and how you grew up as a child, you obviously that helped you out, and for people who don't know, Daryl Davis has converted 200 plus neo-Nazi and KKK members. And I would think that would really help out, like describing to our audience what your childhood was like and how
Sure.
that related to.
Yeah, well, I don't like to say that I converted them. They converted themselves, but I was the impetus, for over 200 to reconsider their ideology and choose a new path. My childhood, I was born in 1958. I'm 62 years old now. And as I said, I started traveling at the age of 3 in 1961. When I would go overseas, and you're in a country for 2 years, and then at the end of the assignment, you come back home here to the States. You're here for a few months, possibly a year, and then you get transferred to another country for 2 years. So it's like back and forth, back and forth. Wow. And I did this through about the age of 13. And when I was overseas, my classes in elementary school were filled with kids from all over the world. Anybody who had an embassy in those countries, all of their children went to the same school. So it was like a little international community in my school.
That's pretty cool.
And yeah, it was pretty cool, especially at that age during that time, because we didn't have this over here in the States. It was either all Black schools and all white schools, or later on, Black and white schools, the segregated, integrated, and then, today we have, diversity in a lot of the city classrooms like I had overseas. But when I was, when I was surrounded by kids from Nigeria, Japan, France, Germany, Norway, Finland, Guatemala, whoever had Czechoslovakia, anybody who had an embassy there, their kids were there. That's all I knew. That was my norm. It was, And so when I come back home, I would either be in an all Black school or a Black and white school, depending upon whether I was in the segregated or newly integrated. And there was not that amount of diversity that I had overseas. So if you think about it like that, literally, when I was overseas, I was living 10 years ahead of myself into the future, because that scenario would have yet to come here. Of course, like I said, it's here now in many city classrooms, maybe not so much in the rural ones, but in the city ones it was. So I came back, prepared for diversity. That was my norm, whereby a lot of my peers back home were not. They were not prepared for that. And so, it made things a little funny, a little strange. So one of the times when I came back, I was at a newly integrated school, and there were two Black kids, myself in fourth grade, this is age 10, 1968, and a little Black girl in second grade. So, I wouldn't really, hang out with second graders because I was a big bad fourth grader, right? So consequently, all of my friends were in fourth and fifth grade, and naturally they all were white because there weren't any more Black kids. And some of these white boys were members of the Cub Scouts. They invited me to join, so I joined the Scouts, had a good time, and did a lot of interesting things. There were never any problems until we participated in this parade. And it was the Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Brownies, 4-H Club, and whatever other organizations. So we're marching, and I'm the only Black person in this parade. The streets are blocked off, sidewalks are lined with nothing but white people, because it was in the area in which I lived. And people were cheering us and waving and carrying on. And we got to one point in this march, and off to my right, suddenly I was getting hit with bottles and soda pop cans and rocks and debris from the street. And having never had any previous experience with this kind of thing, my first thought was, oh, these people over here, there was like maybe a couple kids, a couple of adults, kids maybe maybe a year or so older than me. So I assumed it was kids and their parents. I didn't know. But anyway, my first inclination was, these kids over here don't like the Scouts. That's how naive I was. I didn't realize I'm the only Scout getting hit, right? Until my Scout leaders all came running, and they're all white, and they like huddled over me and escorted me out of the danger. And I kept saying, why are they hitting me? Why are they hitting me? I didn't do anything. I didn't say anything to them. I'm trying to find rationale behind this. Like, what did I do? I didn't do anything. I'm just walking straight.
In a 10-year-old's mind. I mean,
exactly, and they kept, shushing me and rushing me along, saying, it'll be okay. Hurry up, Daryl, hurry up. It'll be okay. And so they never answered my question as to why this was happening. But I realized that I was the target because nobody else around me, none of my other fellow Scouts were getting this special protection. So, and because they wouldn't answer me, I began to conjure up excuses. Like maybe it's because I'm the new kid on the block. You know how you pick on, you test a new kid, that kind of thing. I had every excuse but the right excuse because I had no reason to know that kind of stuff. And so when I got home later that day, my mother and father, who were not at the march, they were cleaning me up, putting Band-Aids on me and stuff, and asking me, how did I fall down and get all scraped up? And I told them I didn't fall down. I told them exactly what had happened. For the first time in my life, my mother and father sat me down and explained to me what racism was.
Wow.
And believe it or not, at the age of 10, I had never heard that word, racism. It wasn't in my world. And, people often ask me, why didn't your parents tell you about that to begin with? Well, at first, when, as an adult, when I was asked that question, I was thinking, yeah, how come they didn't? They sort of blindsided me. I got blindsided by this thing. I should have known about this.
Yeah.
And I was a little perturbed perhaps, but later on, I realized why they didn't tell me. And that's because you try to protect your children as best you can.
Yeah.
And in the world that I was in, it didn't exist. I was around people from all over the world, and we all got along. It wasn't like, oh, that guy's from Czechoslovakia, I don't want to mess with him. Or that person, has yellow skin, they're from Japan. This person has, white skin or whatever. that stuff just didn't compute to my 10-year-old community. None of us. And while we didn't always speak the same languages, we learned how to play together, work together, have slumber parties together. So that racism thing did not exist. And that was a good thing, because I think about it like both my parents are gone now.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think about it, and let's say they had told me about this. It's kind of hard for a 10-year-old to process that. And I might get the wrong impression. Like, okay, so these people who don't like me are white people.
Mm-hmm.
And then I might become suspicious of every white person that I see. Mm-hmm. Because is this one of those people who doesn't like me? Mm-hmm. Maybe I shouldn't be so friendly with them. Maybe they're just, smiling in my face.
Now
And so I'm already being prejudiced against somebody because of what I heard, rather than get to know people and judge them on how they treat me.
That's an interesting way to look at it. They were in the process of trying to protect you. In the process of telling like a young child that racism does exist without them kind of navigating life on their own, it kind of hinders their ability to differentiate between people's characters, I would think.
Right. Yeah. And so I might have prejudged somebody just on how they looked, mm-hmm. which was what was happening to me by the people on the street throwing things at me.
Wow.
Okay. So, I'm an only child, mm-hmm. right? I didn't have big brothers and sisters and stuff. So my parents got it right the first time. So, I relied on them for answers to my questions or solutions to my problems. Mm-hmm. And, either they would provide me with those things or provide me with the tools by which I could figure out the solution or the answer.
Okay.
Unlike, if you have an older brother or sister, they've already been through it and they tell you what's going to happen, et cetera. So I relied on my parents for that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And my parents had never lied to me, never. But on this day in 1968, mm-hmm. when they were telling me about this thing called racism, I did not believe them. Literally, I did not believe them. I thought they were lying for the first time in my life, because exactly, my 10-year-old brain could not wrap itself around the idea that someone who had never seen me, someone who had never spoken to me, someone who knew absolutely nothing about me would want to hurt me for no other reason than this, the color of my skin. It just made no sense, especially given the fact that I've been around people who look just like those people. Yeah. So how do you, balance that? It was like a cognitive dissonance. Well, how come the white people in my school treat me okay? My little French friends, my little German friends, my little Australian friends overseas, they were white. They treated me fine. So it can't be a white thing, because they look just like the people on the street. So why are my parents lying to me? It doesn't make any sense. That's what I was thinking. Now, had I grown up here my whole life in the States, I probably would have been a little more cognizant and understood. But because I'd been exposed to it, I couldn't accept it. So I didn't believe them. And about within 2 months later, same year, 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I remember it very well. Even though I was 10 years old or whatever, every major city in this country, Baltimore, Detroit, Philadelphia, New York, Nashville, Chattanooga, Los Angeles, my hometown, Chicago, wherever, right here, Washington, D.C., all burned to the ground. Just like, we're seeing, in the last few weeks here. Yes. All in the name of this new word that I had learned called racism. And
quite the time to learn it.
Huh?
Quite the time to learn that new word.
Right on time. And, then I realized that my parents had not lied to me. They told me the truth. Wow. But what I didn't understand, I understood now that this thing called racism does exist. Mm-hmm. My parents were right. But why? Why do people hate each other because of the color of their skin? And I formed a question in my own mind at that time, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me?
Mhm.
And for the next 52 years, I've been looking for the answer to that question. Over the years, since starting as a teenager and on through my adulthood, I've purchased books, all kinds of stuff. Books on Black supremacy, white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, all trying to get the answer. Where does that ideology come from? Where's it going? How can it be addressed? I've read all these books. I have a vast library on the stuff, but all my books talk about it, but they don't answer the question as to how it comes ingrained in people. I knew that it's a learned behavior. You're not born with it. You may be born into it if your family's in it, but you're not born with it. You understand? It's a learned behavior.
Kind of
So,
religion, I would assume.
um,
Like it was passed down generation. Those ideologies are passed down generationally.
well, for some people, yes. For some people, yes, it's passed down generationally. But also, you can acquire it outside of your generation, because there are a lot of families who are not racist at all, but their kids end up being, either because of a lot of dysfunction in the family, they're looking for something else to belong to, or they read the wrong book, or they got involved with the wrong crowd. Peer pressure. Like you might have a mom and dad who are not on drugs, but but the kids get involved in it or something because of who they hang out with, that kind of thing.
Their environment. Yeah.
Exactly. It could be environmental. Exactly. It could also be socioeconomic. For example, let's take a depressed coal mining town, for example. Most of your coal miners are white people, and let's say they've been digging coal all their lives. Right after high school, they go right to the coal mines. Their granddaddy dug coal, their daddy dug coal. Now they're going to dig coal, and their kids are going to dig coal. So that's all they know, and they get paid every week, and they're happy. Their bills are getting paid. They can put food on the table. They're not racist at all. They got a good job. They're supporting their family, and life is great. All right, but then the company gets the idea. You know what? Let's lay off these people, and let's hire some of these immigrants. And because they'll work for that much. Right now we're paying this much, so we can save some money, cut some corners. Greed, right? And so they lay off these white workers, and these are white people who own the companies, right? Who are doing this.
Yes, sir.
And they bring in these immigrant people, whether they are legal or illegal, doesn't matter, because they only going to get paid that much, and they're happy with that much. This is the thinking of the people who are doing this, not mine. And so these white guys are out of work, and guess what? They cannot find another job because they're not qualified for anything else. All they know is digging coal. You give them a vacuum cleaner and ask them to vacuum the room, they don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
All they know is digging coal. So they are not qualified for other employment. The bank is knocking on their door for their mortgage money. They're out of work. They can't pay the bills. The Klan sees that kind of thing happening in different cities and towns. So they show up, they have a rally, and people come to the rally, and then they preach, the blacks have the NAACP, the Jews have the ADL. Nobody stands up for the white man except the Ku Klux Klan. Some N-word or some, S-word has got your job. Yeah. And, you can't put food on your family's table. You can't put clothes on your kids' back because you're out of a job. Your job's not gone, but you're gone. Come join us. We'll get your job back. Now, these are people who were never racist before. And they began thinking, what do I have to lose? Yeah. Maybe they're right. Okay, give me an application, sign me up. So then they're in the organization that way. It has nothing to do with generation.
They're in a kind of a vacuum chamber of these ideas.
Exactly. Or you go to a town that might be, a Klan stronghold or something. And, you move there for your business or whatever. Well, if you want to get along in that town, you got to assimilate. You join the local chamber of commerce, your wife and joins a local bridge club, and you join the local country club, and you join the local Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, being part
good
of
old boy network.
Yeah.
And how did the people in the Ku Klux Klan, I guess the people of power, what ideologies were they feeding these people these like new, I guess you would say, new members? Like what ideologies, like how were they like brainwashing them with certain ideas
Oh
on
yeah,
their belief?
absolutely. They claim to be a Christian organization.
Mhm.
Now, not the Christian organization, that I know and that because what they do, just like any denomination, that's why there's so many different denominations of Christianity.
Mhm.
You have Lutherans, Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterian, Catholics, Protestants, on and on and on. And each one of these takes the Bible and interprets it to fit what they believe. It could be the same Bible, the same exact words, but it's subject to personal interpretation or denominational interpretation.
So it's kind of like confirmation bias a little bit. They're just keep kind of reading through the Bible until they find something that kind of fits with their argument, and then they apply.
Yes, until they find something that fits with their argument, or they take a verse and they manipulate it or twist it,
Mhm.
or give you their own interpretation of it,
Mhm.
which is usually the case.
Was there
Go ahead.
was there like a popular verse in the Bible, or like certain like anything?
Well,
like
for example, they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation.
Mhm.
So when I've interviewed some people, I've asked them, I bring my Bible here, show me chapter and verse where it says blacks and whites must be separate.
Mhm.
So they go through there and they find this verse, and I forgot the chapter and verse. I have it written down though, but I'm going to paraphrase. It says something to the effect of, a lamb shall not lay with a wolf. So I said, what does that mean? And they said, well, it means two different species shall not lay together.
Mhm.
I said, well, wait a minute. Blacks and whites are not two different species. We're the same species, just two different colors.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Blacks are a whole separate species. Whites are a different species. So they take that and manipulate it to fit what they want. For example, Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, right? And they got kicked out of the Garden of Eden by God because Eve made Adam take a bite out of what?
Cut out. Oh, we lost you for a second.
Oh, okay. So Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, right? And God kicked them out of the Garden of Eden because Eve made Adam take a bite out of what?
An apple.
And what do you say, Nick?
Yeah, the apple from the tree.
Okay, now, where'd you get that? You read that in the Bible?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, you both agree with that, right?
Yeah, would.
All right, well, when you get home tonight, I want you to check it.
Check the Bible?
Yeah, because you are already misquoting the Bible.
Really?
That's right.
What did they?
Nowhere from Genesis to Revelations, nowhere in the Bible is the word apple ever written.
Really?
Okay.
Is it like a fruit?
Specifically, what it said was he took a bite out of the forbidden fruit.
So people are playing with the words that are in the book already. So
exactly. So you've heard, because apples only grow in certain climates. They don't grow over there in that area of the world. You might have pears, mangoes, dates, figs, things like that may not grow in our part of the world.
Yes.
All right. So we had to substitute something in the Western world that people would recognize.
Okay.
An apple. All right. And we've heard it so many times, we accept it as truth. But the word apple does not exist in the Bible. Specifically, it says the forbidden fruit. But you assume that you read that, because you heard it, you assume it's there, and so you read it. And so that's so that's how that works.
Wow. And that
and then we continue the lie. Okay, wow. So we've already lied about it being the apple, right? It's a mild lie, or what we call a little white lie, because white lies are good. So a black lie is bad, right? So we continue the lie because we say, okay, well, one of the differences between a male and a female is males have this thing right here, which is called what?
The Adam's apple.
The Adam's apple. Okay, and you know how we got it?
How's that?
Because God punished us when Adam took, because all men, came from Adam. Adam. Well, all men are based on Adam. So when Adam took a bite out of the apple, God made him choke on it, and there's a lump in his throat, a piece of the apple.
Yeah.
So that's what's called the Adam's apple. That lump. Okay, that's how he punished men, and then how he punished women. Eve, every month a woman has this thing called her period. So and it's painful, and so that was his punishment for women, all because of what Eve did. So again, that's a made up thing.
I'll go ahead and take the Adam's apple. If I had to pick out of the options, yeah. That's funny. But that's really interesting how that little narrative can change, and then it becomes this long game of telephone where everybody else is misquoting the Bible or misquoting their citations.
Exactly. So when you hear, the Bible to a Christian is the book. It is what you live by, what you die by, etc. It's your whole life right here. So when people start telling you, if you don't do this because the Bible says so, you're going to go to hell, and so forth and so on. So when certain things are repeated enough times, it becomes reality to some people, just like the apple became reality to you. So if people start preaching, that black people are bad, or gay people are bad, or Jewish people are bad, or whatever, and they keep hearing it over and over and over again, with using the Bible as the foundation of it, then they just, saturate themselves with it, and that's it. But here's the thing, you got these people who go to church on Sunday to atone for all their sins, they do all week long, and then come Monday morning, they start right back again doing crap. So there was this Klansman who died a few years ago. His name was Johnny Lee Clary, and he was a vehement racist and anti-Semite, hated Jewish people, and he finally saw the light, and he gave it all up and renounced that ideology. A lot of Klan people put him down for doing that, of course, but he became a minister, and he preached, brought everybody together in his church, blacks, whites, whatever, and he just completely gave it up for real. Wow. And he had a saying in his sermons: "You can't be a Sunday saint and a Monday ain't."
Yeah. That's funny. Wow. Oh, I like that one. I'm gonna have to use that.
Yeah.
So how did this this curiosity is building up, and then how did you go from this curiosity and then studying into actually having conversations?
Okay. So like I said, that question that I formed, how can you hate me? You don't even know me, was always plaguing me. Well, I graduated high. I would continue to have, racial encounters and things like that with different people. But I graduated high school. I went to Howard University, and I got my degree in jazz and music. Oh, wow. And I'm a professional musician. So while music is my profession, studying race relations has been my obsession. And and anyway, I joined a country music band because country music had made a resurgence. There had been this movie out with John Travolta called Urban Cowboy.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
You remember that? Yeah. So it was very popular. They had this mechanical bull and country line dances. So all the bars and clubs switched over from top 40 to country. So if you wanted to work in music, live performance, chances are, you joined a country band. So I joined one, and I was the only black guy in the band, and usually the only, if not one of the few, black guys in the places where we would play. Now, the country band that I joined was pretty well established in the area, and they played everywhere in all the country bars. And so
where was this at?
This is in Maryland.
It's in Maryland. Okay.
Yeah. And they had this gig in a town called Frederick, Maryland, about an hour and 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. And so the gig was at a place called the Silver Dollar Lounge. And the Silver Dollar Lounge was unwritten, known to be an all-white lounge.
Okay.
So, there were no signs saying blacks can't come in, nothing like that. Okay, you can go anywhere you want. But blacks did not go in there.
It was just a
Because,
known rule.
yeah, it was just an unwritten rule.
Yeah.
And because they were not welcome there. And when you go somewhere where you're not welcome and alcohol is being served, not a good idea.
Not a good mix.
Not a good mix. So they stayed out of there. And here I am in the Silver Dollar Lounge with this band, and I'm the only black guy in there. So we finished our first set. Like I said, they played there before. I'd never been there. So we finished the first set, come off on break, and I'm walking to go sit down, and somebody comes up from behind me and puts their arm around my shoulder. Now, I don't know anybody in this joint. I've never been here before. So I'm looking around to see who's touching me. And it was this white guy, maybe 15, 18 years older than me. And he says to me, man, I really like your all's music. I said, thank you. And I shook his hand. And he points at the stage and says, I've seen this here band before, but I ain't never seen you before. Where did you come from? And I explained to him, well, I just joined the band. It's my first time here. But yeah, you probably did see them before because they've been here before. So he says, well, man, I sure like your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. I think to myself, well, where does this dude think Jerry Lee Lewis learned how to play? And so I asked him, I wasn't being smart. I just said, well, where do you think Jerry Lee Lewis learned how to play? He said, what you talking about? Well, I explained to him that Jerry Lee got it from the same place I did, from black, blues, and boogie-woogie piano players. Yeah. That's where rock and roll and rockabilly came from. Oh, no, Jerry Lee invented that. I ain't never heard no black man except for you play like that. And so I told the dude, look, I know Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a friend of mine. And he didn't believe that either. I said, he told me himself where he learned how to play. He didn't believe anything I said about Jerry Lee. But he was fascinated with me. He wanted me to come back to his table, and he's going to buy me a drink. So I go back with him, and I wanted a cranberry juice. He pays the waitress. She brings it. He takes his glass, and he clinks my glass and cheers me. Okay. And then he says, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man. Now I'm like totally baffled because, I'm naive. This is not my world. I sat down with thousands of people, different colors and stuff. How is this happening? So innocently, I asked him, I said, why? I was curious. And, I wasn't tuning in. Mm-hmm. And he didn't answer me. He stared at the tabletop. I asked him again. And his buddies elbowed him in the side. I said, tell him. He had a guy sitting next to him. I said, tell me, because now I'm mystified. Yeah. And he says to me, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. I burst out laughing.
Jeez.
This is funny because I know a lot about the Klan. I just got done telling you all, I have every book written on them. I've read them all. And in none of my books, let's talk about how a Klansman will come up to a black guy and embrace him and want to hang out and buy him a drink. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. So this guy's got to be pulling my leg,
Was
I'm
this
laughing.
Encounter with was this your first encounter with the Ku Klux Klan member?
One that admitted to it, yes. Okay. I had to beat up somebody one time.
Oh, really?
And I beat him pretty good, or pretty bad actually.
But, you're bad for him.
Bad for him, right? And I didn't know it at the time. He was a Klan member, and but it didn't matter to me. He was doing wrong. He was on the sidewalk, sitting on top of this lady, banging her head into the sidewalk and hitting her in the face.
Oh, Jesus. Oh.
Yeah, I happened to pull in the parking lot of this all-night restaurant, and that was going on, so I intervened. But I found out later from the lady, because she went to court, and I came as a witness and so forth and so on. And she was a witness for me that he was a Klansman, and he was a member of the fire department.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
I don't know if I want that guy coming by and taking out my fire.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I have robes. I have tons of robes and hoods, and also a police uniform, because I got one of these guys was on the police force.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he says he's a member of the Klan. I'm laughing. He goes inside his pocket, pulls out his wallet, and hands me his Klan membership card. And I look at this thing, and I recognize the Klan insignia, which is a red circle with a white cross and a red blood drop in the center of the cross. Mm-hmm. I'm like, ooh, this thing is for real. So I stopped laughing. It wasn't funny then. And I gave it back to him. And we talked about the Klan and some other things. But the guy was very, very friendly. Okay. And he was most curious about me. because, again, he'd never seen a black guy play like that. He thought it was a white thing. And he gave me his phone number and wanted me to call him whenever I was to come back to this bar with this band, because he wanted to bring his friends. His friends, meaning Klansmen and Klanswomen, to see the black guy who plays piano like Jerry Lee. He just thought that was fascinating. So I'd call him every 6 weeks. We were on a rotation with other bands coming there. And he'd come. He'd bring Klan members with him. And they would gather around the bandstand and watch me play with the band, and then get out and dance on the dance floor. And when I would go to his table on the break to say hello, some of them would hang there because they were curious about me. Others would see me coming and they'd get up and scoot across to another part of the room. So they did not want anything to do with me. Just kind of like look at me, but don't talk to, don't touch, kind of thing.
They'll enjoy the music.
Yeah, exactly. So this went on until the end of the year, and then I quit that band, and I went back to playing rock and roll and whatever else was going on.
Okay.
And then a long while later, it dawned on me, Daryl, you blew it. The answer that's been, the answer that's been plaguing you, that's been avoiding you since the age of 10 to your question, how can you hate me when you don't even know me, fell right into your lap, and it did really, because I had been unable to get that answer. And lo and behold, I meet some Klansmen. Well, who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization that has over 100-year history of practicing hating people who don't look like them or who don't believe as they believe. So I said, I need to get a hold of that guy and have him hook me up with the Klan leader and all that. I'm going to sit him down. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to interview him, and then I'm going to go up north, interview people there, go down south, go to the Midwest, go to the West, and interview different Klan leaders and different Klan members.
So what did you, this surge of inspiration to kind of find other Klan members and kind of take this path to finally answer your question?
Exactly.
What were you doing with your music career at the time? Just trying to.
Oh, I was still playing. But yeah, but I would take the money that I made from playing music and I would invest it into this Klan project.
Oh, smart.
So I'd buy airplane tickets or gas for the car or whatever to go to these places and interview these people. And, some people would talk to me, some people would not talk to me. Some people wanted to fight me, whatever. So I became the first Black author to write a book on the Ku Klux Klan from the perspective of sitting down face to face and interviewing them. There have been 2 books written by Black authors that dealt with the Klan, but each author detailed how he escaped a lynching, one in the 1930s and the other one in the 1940s, but never from the perspective of sitting down saying, hey, why would you lynch me? Asking their people. So it was a very interesting experience, and I'm still doing it. In fact, I just finished writing my second book just 2 days ago. So right now I'm going through my pictures to figure out which pictures I'm going to have put in there, and then send it off to the agent who sends it to the publisher.
Very cool. Did you just start writing, or are you in the process of finishing?
No, the first book came out at the end of '97, beginning of '98. So my second book, I just finished writing it 2 days ago.
Oh, nice! Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to definitely invest in that. That would be a nice little.
It's definitely interesting.
So what were these conversations like, and how did these conversations lead to some of these Klansmen leaving?
Well, when you're sitting down talking with people, you remember what I said, people want to be loved, respected, and heard, and the same things for their families as you want for your own. Okay, so let me just give you an example of how this kind of thing works. I never set out. It was never my mission to convert anybody. My mission was just to simply get the answer to my question, and put it all in a book, and never see these people again. Why would I think that, I would ever be friends with these people? They don't like me. They, not like is a mild word. They hate me. A lot of them did. Some of them tolerated me or whatever, but, so all I wanted to do was interview them, get my information, write the book, and then be done.
Mm-hmm.
As children, we all have heard the expression, a tiger doesn't change its stripes, a leopard doesn't change its spots.
Mm-hmm.
So why would I think a Klansman would change his robe and hood? You know, this is something in my mind that is ingrained in you. And so it doesn't come out. I was wrong, because a leopard does change. I mean, a leopard does not change its spots, and a tiger does not change its stripes. And that's because those animals are born with those stripes and spots. A Klansman or Klanswoman is not born with that ideology. It is acquired from their parents or from their environment, as we talked about earlier. So therefore, what can be learned can also be unlearned.
Okay.
It may take a while, but it can be done. All right. And I wasn't even setting out to unlearn them, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I just want my information to my question. But here's what happened. Over time, we began to humanize one another. Mm-hmm. It's hard to hate somebody when you're sitting right across from them 2 feet away and you're mm-hmm. talking to them and they realize, hey, you know, this black guy wants the same thing for his family as I want for mine. Mm-hmm. And he's showing me respect. He's allowing me to say whatever I want to say, even though it's offensive to him. Yes. All this kind of stuff. You know, they began to humanize me. Mm-hmm. And I began to humanize them. So we start out, you know, this far apart or something. We're complete adversaries, and their wall is up because mm-hmm. I'm the object, you know, that they don't like.
Yes.
Okay. But then as we talk more and more, we find more and more in common. And so the gap is closing. And we get about right here, we have formed a relationship. And we continue talking, you know, over time, weeks, months, whatever. And the gap closes more, because the more you talk, the more you find you have in common.
Yes.
And when you get about here, you're starting a friendship. Mm-hmm. And you found many more things in common, and the trivial things that you have in contrast, such as your skin color, or whether you go to a church, a mosque, a temple, or a synagogue, begin to matter less and less. So,
not to change the discussion, but don't you think that's kind of like what these political parties or ideologies? It's kind of like the same ideal that nobody can kind of find a middle ground, or nobody can find those commonalities between the two, and then that further separation keeps growing and growing and growing.
And yes, you're absolutely right. And that's because they don't know how to do that. Mm-hmm. And let me demonstrate how I did it, or how it happened. Okay. And then I began doing it more and more. Yeah. I was never expecting to become friends with these people. Mm-hmm. Now some of them are my best friends. Wow. A lot of them have left because of me. You know, mm-hmm. I've given them food for thought, and then they rethink their ideology, and I end up with their robes and hoods and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But like I said, you know, when they first see me, that wall goes up, mm-hmm. because I'm not what they like. Mm-hmm. All right. So naturally, they're superior, I'm inferior. They're going to be on the attack. Mm-hmm. All right. So if you want to plant a seed, you can't plant it when somebody's wall is up, because you're going to hit the wall, the seed's going to bounce right back. Yeah. You've got to lower the wall, and then the seed can go over into their dirt or whatever. So when the wall is up, now, I pose the question, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And I'm told things like, well, Mr. Davis, you know, all you have to do is look at the prison system. You know, black people are criminals. You know, they're more prone to crime than white people. If you look at the prison system, there are more blacks in prison than white people. Okay, mm-hmm. That's true, but it's a half-truth. There are definitely more blacks in prison than white people. But what they're not considering is the inequality or inequity of the prison system or of our judicial system. Mm-hmm. A lot of minorities don't get treated equally as white people do when it comes time to go to jail or get sentences and things like that. Or the fact that there are also a lot of white people, poor white people and poor black people in prison who don't belong there, but they didn't have finances to afford adequate legal representation. Yeah. So they take a plea deal to something, you know, they didn't even do, and there they are. Okay, so he's not considering that. All he sees is the result. Yeah. You know, there's this many black people, this many white people in prison, and that many black people in prison. So therefore, blacks must be more criminally prone. Okay, so that fits his narrative. Then he tells me that Black people are inherently lazy. We want to scam the government welfare system. We want all the free handouts we can get because we don't want to work. And then he tells me that Black people have a smaller brain than white people. And the larger the brain, the more room for intelligence.
Did you ask him if he was a biologist? Did you?
Yeah, he thinks he is, or neurologist or whatever. But anyway, he probably needed a lobotomy. But anyway, they believe that.
Yeah.
They believe that. So now I'm sitting 2 feet from the guy, and I'm listening to the guy. Now, is what he is saying to me offensive? Of course it's offensive. Am I offended by it? Absolutely not. Why would I be offended by an untruth, by a lie? This guy doesn't know me. You know, he just walked into the room to be interviewed, just met me for the first time, and 5-10 minutes later, he's telling me that my brain is small, I'm on welfare, and I'm prone to crime. That's a lie.
Yeah.
So if I were to, okay, now, because I'm allowing him to talk, that has thrown him off his game. Because usually, if he gets into a conversation with somebody like who looks like me, or somebody else he doesn't like, he starts spewing, yeah, they push back, you know, and they attack back, and so that wall stays up. But because I'm not pushing back, that wall is coming down. I'm allowing him to spew all these insults and all this nonsense, and so he's being heard. So the wall is coming down, right? And then when he gets done with his vitriol, he feels compelled to reciprocate. After all, I sat there and listened to him. So now he's going to give me the opportunity to respond.
Now it's your turn.
So now it's my turn. Okay, now I could go on the offense and attack him. And I would be right. I would be well within my rights to do so because I have some facts, you know, that he lied about. I could say, no, you are the criminal. You are the one taking Black people and hanging them from trees and dragging them behind pickup trucks and walking into their churches and shooting them or blowing up their synagogues and churches and whatever else. You're the criminal.
Moral high ground.
Right, exactly. And he was saying, you know, that, you know, this brain thing, his evidence for that is that that Black kids consistently score lower on the SATs than white kids. Again, this is a truth. This is a truth, but it is a half truth, and it has nothing to do with having a smaller brain. The fact is, most Black kids in schools are in the inner cities, and the inner cities do not have equality to the schools in the suburbs.
Yes.
All right. So therefore, yes, they would score lower, but the Black kids in the suburbs in school score just as high as anybody else, if not higher. And white kids who are in the inner city also score low, but there are fewer white kids in the inner city than in the suburbs, okay, where you have greater facilities, better teachers, better textbooks, etc. All right?
Tutoring options. And,
exactly. So he's not considering that. All he sees is the result. So, like I said, you know, I just sit back and listen to him, and everything he's saying is wrong and offensive, but I don't push back. So then when it's my turn, I don't go on the offense because that would cause the wall to go back up. I want to keep that wall down. So I go on the defense, and I say to him, I said, look, I don't have a criminal record. Nobody in my family has a criminal record. I've never been on welfare. Nobody in my family's been on welfare. As far as goes, I've never measured my brain size, but I'm sure it's the same size as yours or anybody else's. I said, and speaking of SATs, my SATs got me into college, and I have a bachelor's degree. Now I already know he barely made it out of high school. I've been all around the world. My parents have master's degrees. My dad was working on his PhD before he passed. So I knew that I had more intelligence in this little fingernail than he did and his whole clan put together. But I'm not going to throw that in his face and attack him, because that would make the wall go. I just let him know that it doesn't make me a better person than anybody. It just makes me have broader knowledge.
But you're disproving all the things that he
exactly
displaying.
So right, because if I threw that in his face, it would hit that wall again. So keep the wall down, and by doing so, that seed got planted on the other side of the wall because the wall was low. And I know this for a fact because every time somebody quits and I ask, what was the turning point? What was the reason? They tell me, they go home and they think about the conversation. It's like, damn, I just had a 3-hour conversation with a black guy. That's never happened before. Usually within 45 seconds, just boom, boom, boom.
I'm back.
Yeah, either verbally or physically. And so they're thinking, what he said about such and such, that makes sense. But he's black. but what he said about such and such else, that was true too. But he's black. So they're having a cognitive dissonance where they know what I said was true. They've checked it out, whatever, and they determine, yes, it was true, but they don't want to accept it because it came from a black source. So it's like a cognitive dissonance, right? And so then they're left with this dilemma, which is, do I disregard the fact that he's black and believe it because it's true, because I know it to be true, and change my direction, or do I consider the fact that he's black and continue living a lie? So that's
yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. So they make that decision. I don't convert them; they make it.
I liked your. I think I was listening to. Wasn't sure if it was a podcast or an interview, but about certain narratives that that some of these Klan members have given you, and saying that like, oh well, all going back to the prison example, that there's a lot more black people in prison than white people. Well, you could say, and you gave the example I heard that all white people are serial killers. So
yeah,
I enjoyed that. Yeah, and I started thinking to myself, like, I couldn't name any black serial killers either.
There are, but not that many.
Exactly. Yeah, there's that confirmation bias again, and it can work both ways. Yeah.
Sure, and that was so. I mean, it was an asinine argument, but it worked. And see, sometimes you have to go where somebody is. We spend a lot of time talking about the other person, or talking at the other person, or talking beyond or past the other person, rather than talk with the other person. This is what solves problems.
Yes.
All right. And that example you gave, this Klan officer, he was known as an exalted cyclops, which means district leader. Anyway, he was in my car with me, and we were riding around, and we're talking about crime or something. And he said that all black people have a gene within them that makes them a criminal. They're born with that gene, most of them. And so I said, what are you talking about? And he said, now, I'd heard this before, but I wanted to get his perspective. And he said, well, who's doing all the drive-bys and carjackings in Southeast? By Southeast, he meant Southeast Washington, D.C., which is predominantly black. And it's a high crime ridden area. There's some whites who live there, but it's predominantly black and high crime ridden. I said, okay, it's black people. I said, but that's what lives there. I said, who's doing all the crime in Bangor, Maine?
Yeah.
White people, because that's what lives there, right?
So any black people there.
Yeah. So I said, you're not even considering the demographics.
Yeah.
He says, no, it had nothing to do with it. You all have this gene. And so I'm driving, sitting over here. I said, look, man, I said, I'm as black as anybody you've ever seen. I said, I have never done a drive-by or a carjacking. How do you explain that? He didn't even think about it. He answered me like that. He said, your gene is latent. It hasn't come out yet. Wow. So, how are you going to argue with that? I mean, that is so far out in left field, you can't even grab onto it. So I just sat there dumbfounded, like, speechless. He's sitting over here all like, smug, and so you got nothing to say. So I thought about it, and I figured, you know what? It would be no point for me to start quoting scientific books by professors and doctors of this and neurologists and whatever else, because that would be talking past him. I have to talk with him. So I might have to come down to that level. So that's what I did in order to resonate with him. I said, well, you know what? All white people, I made this up. I said, all white people have a gene within them that makes them a serial killer. And he's like, well, how do you figure? And I said, well, simple. Name me 3 black serial killers.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't do it.
No.
I said, here, I'm going to give you one. I'm going to name one for you. Now all you have to do is just name me two.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it. I said Charles Manson, Jeffrey Dahmer, Henry Lee Lucas, John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, David Berkowitz, son of Sam, Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler, on and on and on.
Yeah.
I said, son, you are a serial killer. And he said, Daryl, I've never killed anybody. I said, your genus latent hasn't come out yet.
Got him.
And he goes, well, that's stupid. I said, well, duh. And I said, it is stupid, but it's no more stupid for me to say that about you than what you said about me.
Mm-hmm.
And he got very, very quiet, but I could tell his wheels were like spinning 90 miles an hour in his brain. And then when he finally spoke again, he changed the subject. But within 5 months of that conversation, he was done. As a result of that conversation, he quit the Klan.
Wow.
His robe was the first robe that I got.
That's amazing.
And it was a stupid argument, but that's where you have to go sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody wants to argue with you on this level, then you go to that level. If they're here, they're not going to understand what's up here. So
What's
you
the
have to go here.
about? Yeah. I hear you. Wow. And by doing that, by having a conversation, it becomes less defensive or about who's right or who's wrong. It becomes about what the issue is at hand. And
and don't, if you want to, and this applies to anybody who may be adversarial.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we can take race off the table. Any other hot topic, abortion, nuclear weapons, the current presidency, the war in the Middle East, global warming, whatever. These are all hot topics. You're on one side, he's on the other side. Don't frame it as a debate, because when you say the word debate, people are ready.
Mm-hmm.
Just say, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's exchange, some views, things like that. That lowers the temperature. Yes, you're going to debate, but when you frame it as a debate, people are ready. Just say conversation.
Get very
yeah, absolutely. Because I'm going to tell you something that I also have found. I've been doing this now for 36 years.
Wow.
And what I've found is, in between my gigs, I tell you, I would much rather be on stage, playing rock and roll and seeing people out there dancing and stuff.
I'm sure that's where your heart is at.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than be at a Klan rally watching them light some cross on fire and espouse white supremacy and all this other kind of stuff. But what I found is this: ignorance breeds fear.
Mm-hmm.
We fear the things we don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And if we do not keep that fear in check and address it, here's your ignorance, it breeds the fear. And if we don't keep that fear in check, that fear will escalate and create hatred, because we hate the things that frighten us.
Yes.
If we don't keep that hatred in check, it escalates and creates destruction. And I'll give you an example of that you all have seen in the last 3 years. If you remember the white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it was in August of 2017. I know each of those people, all the people there who organized it. I know them personally, and the speakers, the alt-right and the other white supremacists and those people.
Now, that was about taking down the statues, if I believe?
Okay, let me tell you what it was about.
Yeah.
That's what you learned from the media.
Uh-huh.
Okay, no. There were some people there who were genuinely there to protest the removal of the Confederate statues. Okay, but the real reason why they were there was to initiate the start of a race war.
Okay.
Okay, there were some people, like I said, who were there, with the intention of protesting the statue, the removal of the statues. But the majority of people there were testing the race war.
Was there an organization specific there that was?
No, there was a Klan, there were neo-Nazis, there was League of the South, there were individuals, there was a Vanguard, all kinds of different white supremacist groups were there. And now, here's the thing. When you want to occupy a piece of public property for a certain period of time, say from noon to 4, whatever, for any purpose, if you want to have a rally, have a demonstration, set up a lemonade and hot dog stand, whatever you're going to use this public property for, you need a permit.
Okay.
So you go to City Hall, right? And you get an application, you fill out your name and state your purpose.
Mhm.
I want to have a demonstration for this, against this, or for this. I want to give a speech. I want to play music. I want to set up my hot dog and hamburger stand, whatever. And they review it and they give you a permit between those hours. You cannot put down, I want to start a race war.
They're not gonna
You will not be given the permit. Okay. So you say, I want to protest the removal of the Confederate statues. That is my heritage. My great-great-grandfather fought in the Confederacy, and I don't want my heritage to be removed. Okay, that's quasi-legitimate. Fine. Here's your permit. So now you get, you're licensed. You've got you think you have carte blanche to go do whatever you want to do. So then you change up because you got the license, and so now you're gonna start your race war. Again, that was not the intention of everybody, but the most people who were there, that's what they were there for, to test it. Because Charlottesville the police department there is very weak, very weak. Unlike, say, Washington, D.C., where you have protests every day. They know how to handle that kind of stuff. The NYPD up in New York, they know how to handle that kind of stuff.
They're used to it.
Yeah, they're used to it. Every day somebody's protesting something somewhere. So in Charlottesville, no, that's not the norm. So it's like mall security guards, that kind of thing. And anyway, so here's the thing. Two things. Anybody who knows American history knows that there were Black people and there were Jewish people who also fought in the Confederacy. Black people had to fight for their slave owners. All right. In the South, there were many Jewish slave owners. They didn't want to give up that free labor. They're making tons of money off of somebody else picking cotton, picking tobacco.
They're back.
Exactly. So the Jews, the Blacks, and the whites in the South fought against the Jews, the Blacks, the whites in the North, in the Union Army. All right. And the Union Army won. Okay, which is why, slaves got freed.
Yeah, it is.
And the Civil War was about slavery. No matter what anybody tells you, it was about slavery.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, no, it was about states' rights. Yeah, the state's right to own a slave. That's what it was about. Okay, so here's the thing. So if that was truly your heritage, how come you didn't invite? Because there are some Black descendants who support the Confederacy. They don't support slavery, but they support the Confederacy because their ancestors fought in the Confederacy.
Part of their heritage.
Exactly, it's part of my heritage. My ancestors fought in the Confederacy. My parents are from Virginia, which was the seat of the Confederacy. That's where General Robert E. Lee was from, Virginia. All right. So my ancestors, the only reason I was born in Chicago is because my dad had a job there at the time.
Yeah.
But they're from Virginia. My slave ancestors fought in the Confederacy. Now, while I would honor my ancestors, because without them I wouldn't be here, I do not honor the Confederacy. And obviously I don't support slavery.
Yes.
But why didn't they invite some of their Black and Jewish counterparts who do support the Confederacy to join them if it was all about the statues? Because if they could fight together 150 years ago, why can't they march together 150 years later?
There's some discrepancies there.
Exactly, okay? And so instead of including them, they excluded them, and they marched through Charlottesville yelling and screaming racist and anti-Semitic epithets. So therefore, it was not about heritage. It was about hate. Number two, while they claim to be honoring their great ancestors who they never met, because the Civil War ended in 1865. Yeah. Nobody today knows anybody from 1865. But you can still honor them. You can honor people posthumously, and which is fine. But while they're claiming to be honoring those people, they are actually dishonoring their ancestors who they do know, who raised them, their fathers, their grandfathers, and if they're lucky enough, maybe they met their great-grandfather. Yeah. Because these people fought in World War II. And many of them lost their lives or lost an arm and a leg fighting who? The Nazis.
Adolf Hitler and the Nazis.
Adolf Hitler, exactly. So how do you tell me, think about this, how do you tell me you are honoring your great ancestors from the Confederacy, but yet you're dishonoring the people who you do know, who you're closer to,
more recent,
and you're more recent, and you're walking down the streets of Charlottesville next to neo-Nazis flying swastikas and saying white power, hi Hitler. Wait a minute, we went to war against the Nazis. We went to war against Adolf Hitler. So why are you marching with Nazis? All right. And number two, how can it be about heritage? The Nazis don't have any heritage in Charlottesville, Virginia. Adolf Hitler wasn't even born during our Confederacy. The Nazis didn't even exist during our Confederacy. So how can they be in Charlottesville talking about heritage?
That's ridiculous.
Exactly. Which is why that whole thing was a sham. It wasn't about the statues. It wasn't about heritage. It was about hate. All right. You don't bring the Nazis in for heritage. We don't have any American heritage with the Nazis other than fighting them.
Yeah, being enemy.
The enemy. And as I said, they didn't even exist between 1861 and 1865 when our Civil War was going on. So the thing about the statues was simply an excuse to get a permit. You understand? And see, that's what the media screwed up on, because that's what they reported. Because that record is public record. You can go to City Hall and pull the permit and see. Somebody writes down, I want to, protest the statues. And so that's what they report. But they did not look into the background of it.
And the media has caused a lot of, I think, more division nowadays than anything else. I mean, it's just the way information is relayed back to us with the prejudice to make us look a certain way or lean towards a certain way. It's not informative anymore. It's just kind of what's good to hear.
Yeah. And, you're right. Some media outlets definitely slant one way while the other ones slant the other way. And really, we should be pissed off about that, because if you look at it, sit back and look at it objectively, they're calling you stupid. The media is, because they're telling you what to think instead of telling you how to think. And when you tell somebody what to think, you're assuming that they're too stupid to make up their own mind. When I was a kid, we had the news, and we had people who gave unbiased, unfiltered news. They didn't tell us, opinions. They just gave us the news, and we make up our own minds.
You do what you want with this information.
Exactly. Here's what happened, and that's it. They don't say, well, I think, Bob, who cares what you think? Just give me the news. Let me think. Okay. Today, all these news stations, they give you their opinions. Wow. Because we're too dumb to think for ourselves. That's what they're assuming.
Yeah. That's ridiculous. Oh.
All right. Before we wrap this up, I wanted to ask you, so with all the tension going on right now in America, how do we go about solving, racism now? Like, what can people do? How do we fix this issue?
Okay. Two things. One, we need to stop trying this top-down approach. The top-down approach works for certain situations. If you work for a corporation or a department, something like that, police department, for example, it's top-down. When the people at the top, management or whatever, when they are tight, the people down on the floor or on the street, they're tight, because they take their cues from the top. If people upstairs are screwing up, they're going to be screwing up downstairs. Okay, that's just natural. So it's top down, cue from the top. You cannot address racism like that. It's got to be a bottoms up. All right. The top level is destruction. Forget about it. Once something is destroyed, it's not coming back. You look at George Floyd, he's not coming back. Forget the destruction. Remember George Floyd, but forget the destruction. All right. Next level down is hatred. Forget the hatred. That's just a symptom. Just like the destruction, another symptom. Next level down is the fear. forget about it. It's another symptom. The bottom level down is ignorance. That is the source. Stop worrying about the top level. Fix the source. Go down to the bottom. If you have cancer in your bone, you can't be putting a topical cream on top of your arm, or a Band-Aid. You got to go down to the bone, hit that chemo or radiation or whatever regimen you're going to do. So let's address ignorance, because if we cure the ignorance, then we know. Ignorance is what you don't know. And when you cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear, because you only fear what you don't know.
Yes.
And if you cure the ignorance and there's no fear, guess what? There's nothing to hate, because we hate what we fear. If there's something to hate, then there's nothing to destroy. So let's focus on the bottom one, the ignorance. And fortunately, there is a good cure for ignorance. That cure is called education, education and exposure. When you provide somebody the education, then they don't fear anything, because they know what's happening. And that's where we need to focus. We focus too much on the symptoms rather than the nucleus of it. So that's what we need to do. Also, we need to spend more time, like I said, talking with people instead of talking at them and beyond them. The best way for any person to defeat an opposition is to divide and conquer.
Okay.
You know, you get people fighting amongst themselves, divide them up, then they're easier to attack and conquer them, rather if they're unified, right? We don't have to wait for our enemies to divide us. We're doing a good job ourselves.
Yeah.
We're doing their job for them. They're just sitting back, watching us and laughing at us until we get all divided up and start fighting each other. Then they swoop down and get us. You know, so we have to be aware of that, and we have to start addressing domestic terrorism as much as we address external terrorism, because we got a lot of it going on here in this country. And let me just say,
to kind of differentiate between what's right, the right way of going about combating an issue, and then the wrong way, or people taking advantage of situations.
Yes.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. And another thing that the media doesn't talk about is this. 2042, the year 2042 is going to be a very pivotal year.
Why do you say that?
Well, because it is. Because this country has always been a white majority rule. This country was built on a two-tier society.
Yes.
White supremacy and slavery. All right. And as we progress through the years, we progress like this, maybe like this, but we never progressed like this.
Where it's equality.
Exactly. Okay. We're still like this. Here, 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 whatever. We're still below this. Okay. Now, by Black people in this country are only 12%, 12.9, almost 13% today. All right. When I was a kid, back in the 60s, we were 12%. We have not grown. All right. Native Americans have not grown. They're at 1%. When I was a child, Hispanic people, Latino people were like 2%, 3% right there. White people were 84, 86%. Today, Hispanic people are at 17%, almost 18%.
Wow.
All right. We are still 12%. Asians are at 6% now. So if you just take Black people at 12%, Hispanic people at 17%, that's 29% non-white. And if you check, go back to 1960, the census is done every 10 years. All right. You watch how it progresses from 1960 to 2020. This is happening. People of color, which includes Asian, Black, Hispanic, and whatever else, and white people, this is happening. It is well predicted. It is well predicted that in 2042, this country will be 50-50. 50%, yes, 50% white, 50% non-white. And between 2045 and 2050, this is going to happen for the first time in 401 years.
Where the minority is not the minority anymore.
That's correct. The whites will be the minority, and color people of all different races or whatever will be the majority. And just check it out. Check out the census. that is well predicted, and the media is not talking about it. And I'm going to tell you, there are plenty of white people who embrace that idea. They say, hey, that's evolution. I'm cool with that. I welcome that. But there's also a good percentage who don't welcome it. When you have sat on the throne of power for 401 years, I've been here for 401 years. Okay, since 1619, when the ships came over and brought my ancestors, right? Yeah. That's 401 years. When you have been on the throne of power for 401 years, and now you see your throne legs being chopped down and your butt is being lowered to the level of the inferior people, that can be very disconcerting for you.
You can get along with this.
Yeah. Nobody wants to get off the throne, right? So this is why we're seeing all these groups pop up and start recruiting people. They'll come join us, whether it's the Klan, the alt-right, the neo-Nazis, whatever. Come join us. We're going to take our country back. We're going to build that wall, keep these immigrants out of here. This is our homeland, blah, 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 right? And because people see the landscape changing color, all right? What the Klan and the neo-Nazis and alt-right people tell me, Daryl, I don't want my grandkids to be brown. They call it the browning of America, or white genocide through miscegenation, through race mixing. So they're seeing the color change. What used to be an all-white neighborhood, now it's got Hispanic people, Black people, whatever, and that's freaking them out. Because they used to be able to move out of the neighborhood and move to another all-white neighborhood, but now that all-white neighborhood is all mixed, and now they can't go anywhere, and be all white. So they're freaking out. Do you guys remember 1999?
We were 1 year old. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, let me tell you what happened in 1999. People were freaked out about the year 2000, and they called it Y2K.
Oh, wow. I do know. Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah, I mean, people were like freaking out. Oh man, the world's going to end. My VCR won't work anymore. Whatever. And there like a lot of anxiety was going on around Y2K, because they thought everything was going to stop, come to an end. Well, for white supremacists, 2042 is their Y2K.
Okay.
Like freaking out. So what happens is this: all these groups start trying to recruit to take our country back, to make America great again, and people go and join these groups. And then when the group doesn't do anything, they figure, well, shoot, if the Klan can't do it or the neo-Nazis can't do it, I'll do it myself. Yeah. And they walk into a Black church, boom, 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 or into a synagogue, boom, 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 or the Walmart in El Paso, boom, 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 right? These people are called lone wolves, Now, we have intelligence operatives, FBI and other agencies that have people, agents who look the part. They go and join these groups, to collect intelligence, and they infiltrate, and they gather their intelligence, and they, report it back, and then these plots are foiled. All right?
Before they occur. Yeah.
Before they occur. But you cannot infiltrate a lone wolf. It's only one person.
It's a lot hard.
And as we get closer and closer to 2042, we're going to see, unfortunately, more and more lone wolves, because they're becoming unhinged. In fact, you guys saw one just the other day. 17-year-old boy from Illinois, comes into where? Another state, Wisconsin, with his gun, and kills 2 people and wounds a 3rd, and then goes home. That's a lone wolf.
That's a very irrational thing to do, I would say. Yeah, I mean, that's another whole argument, and besides it, but I mean, that was a very inviting violence into that type of environment by
exactly. And these are lone wolves, man. And unfortunately, I said, we're going to see more and more of them as we get closer, because people don't want their country taken over by people who don't look like them. That's the whole white supremacist mentality. This is a white man's land, and we're going to defend it. We're going to protect it.
This argument that you put towards educating people, and I think that's really important, especially the fact that the information that you just relayed to us, that the more that you educate people about, and I think people get ignorance and stupidity confused or misrepresented, where ignorance is something that you don't know, and stupidity, I guess, would be something that you do know and you still don't change.
Exactly, precisely. And the example that I've given before is if I paint a room
Mm-hmm.
and the walls are wet,
Mm-hmm.
and I do not post any signs that say wet paint, stay off the walls,
Mm-hmm.
anybody entering that room is ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, ignorant as in being unaware that these walls are wet. And so they might go and lean up against the wall, and now they got paint on their clothes due to that ignorance. I can fix that ignorance by putting up signs that say wet paint, stay off the walls. I can stand in the doorway, tell each individual coming into that room, hey, gather around the center. I just painted these walls 10 minutes ago, they're still wet.
Mm-hmm.
So now everybody has the facts. Everybody has the proper information to make the right choice, to make the correct decision. And so one of them still goes and leans up against the wall. And now he's got paint on his clothes and he wants to know why. It's because he's stupid. All right. He had the information to make a good choice or the correct decision. He didn't use it. So there's a cure for ignorance, education. Unfortunately, there's no cure for stupidity, because if you give the person the education and they don't use it, what else can you do until they decide to use it?
Going on to about how you plan on educating other people. And I've heard that you wanted to take the robes that you've collected and start a museum with it.
Yeah, right there by you. In fact, well, I'm going to have my own museum eventually. I've got my 501c3 already. I just need to find a building within my my purchase range that I can afford. But in the meantime, I'm loaning a lot of my collection to the Orlando Holocaust Center down in Orlando, and they're opening up an exhibition on my work and some of my collection this fall. It'll be virtual for a couple months, and then as they begin to let people back in, it'll be physical.
We'll have to go check it out. Yeah,
absolutely. And then it's going to tour the country and then come back to me.
Oh wow! And I just wanted to go over the fact that you're doing that, and some people in certain communities, I would say, like, I watched your Accidental Courtesy documentary, and when you were with Kwame Rose and I forget the other gentleman's name, sitting down at the bar, he had said that he didn't want his 1-year-old daughter going into a museum with Klan paraphernalia and other robes and such, because he didn't want to introduce her to that type of hatred. Well, why do you think that's important? And how did you, I know that you and Kwame Rose and the other gentleman left a little a little disgruntled, but I heard that you ended up becoming friends afterwards.
This is true. It was very contentious. What you saw was only 8 minutes of what lasted just over an hour.
Wow.
And it almost became physically violent.
Jeez.
But I wanted those. I wanted, obviously we couldn't show the whole hour, or the film would be 3 hours long or something.
Very good documentary, by the way.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it. Yeah.
But I wanted enough of it to show that this problem is not just one-sided. There's racism here, racism there, etc. And it's important to show that nobody has a monopoly on racism. It can be expressed by anybody of any color, and so that's important. But yes, we did end up becoming friends, and then one of the guys, the older guy, he reverted back to his former self, unfortunately. But that happens, which is fine. And I want to point out something, that was the Baltimore chapter of Black Lives Matter, and no Black Lives Matter chapter should be confused with another chapter. Black Lives Matter is not an organization. It is a movement. Okay, an organization is something that is centralized. Has one president. They create policy in the headquarters. People pay dues to belong, and that policy is disseminated to all the chapters around the country. So everybody is on the same page, like the Boy Scouts of America, the NAACP, the Red Cross. These are organizations. And so the Red Cross here in Washington, D.C. is no different than the Red Cross in West Palm Beach. They had the same policy, the same bylaws, et cetera. All right. That's a centralized organization. Black Lives Matter is not centralized. It's not an organization. It's a movement. the founders had a great idea about putting it together
Mhm.
to spotlight the plight of Black men who, for lack of a better term, were being murdered
Mhm.
by white police officers, and so they got to go to their graves.
Mhm.
Where white men in the same situation either got to go home or they'd go to jail. Some went to jail via Burger King, like
Mhm.
Dylan Roof. All right. So that's a good idea. But the problem is they didn't want to trademark the name and they didn't want to centralize. So as a result, you got all these different chapters of Black Lives Matter all over the country.
Being
You
governed
could,
by the people.
Giovanni, you could go out and start your own Black Lives Matter chapter, and Nick can go out and start his own. I can start my own, because nobody owns the name. And so therefore there's no centralization. And yours might be different than his,
Mhm.
because there's a chapter, there are about 4 or 5 chapters spread out around the country that have contacted me and said, hey, do you give workshops? Can you teach us how to do what you do? Some of them want to work legitimately. They want to sit down with their county council or their city representatives or whatever and try to work things out legislatively, do things the right way. Others want to go out here and tear up stuff and yell and scream. Some are Black supremacists. So there are all kinds of different factions.
But again, the media only covers the ones that are destroying the cities and stuff.
Right, and what the media does is, for example, let's say you have your Black Lives Matter chapter,
Mhm.
Giovanni, and you're sitting down with your state senators and whatever else, explaining what the problem is and how you think it should be addressed, and you want them to write a bill for this, that, the other to be passed or whatever else. That's a legitimate way to do things, and you can still march in the streets and protest. That's everybody's right, okay? But Nick has his chapter, and his idea is to go around town and spray paint BLM all over the place, and do this and do that. Well, when the media says your chapter is in West Palm Beach, and let's
Mhm.
say his chapter is in Pensacola,
Mhm.
all right, the media doesn't say the Pensacola chapter of Black Lives Matter. It just says Black Lives Matter.
Mhm.
So when they cover something bad that they've done, it reflects on your chapter that's doing something good, because they don't differentiate.
Again,
So
how could you
yeah,
hate if you don't know me?
exactly. So what they need to do is they need to come together
Mhm.
and coalesce
Mhm.
and centralize, have one president, agree on what policy, and then spread it out around the country. Because when you're divided, it's not going to work.
You get
When you stand
misrepresented.
united, then it's going to work.
Mhm.
But as a result, each little chapter has its own little leader, and all these little leaders don't agree with each other. It's like having too many chefs in the kitchen. They're all trying to make the same recipe, but they all have their own ideas as to how much sugar and salt to put in it.
Mhm.
Interesting.
I just to close on a little bit of our ideals on the situation that, I have 2 family members that are in law enforcement, and
Mhm.
by no means are they racist and they're very good people, but I think that the judicial system is flawed, and that there is evidence that has been shown to that. But that's, again, you shouldn't be generalizing to every
Right,
police officer,
right.
just like you shouldn't be generalizing to every Black person or every white person.
Absolutely. Agreed 100%.
Mhm.
Like I said, my father was one of the first Black Secret Service agents in this country. And he was in law enforcement before joining the Foreign Service.
Wow.
But one of the problems is that law enforcement can be painted with a broad brush
Mhm.
just with the acts of one person.
Mhm.
Like, for example,
Like we're seeing.
that guy, Derek Chauvin,
Mhm.
who kneeled on George Floyd's neck.
Mhm.
He was a Minneapolis police officer.
Yes, sir.
So now the whole Minneapolis Police Department is tainted because of that one man's action. They must be all bad. They must be all racist or whatever. Okay, Derek Chauvin, obviously displayed poor judgment. Maybe he was a racist, whatever. But that should not reflect upon every officer in that department. But it does.
Mhm.
Okay, and so that's unfortunate. But here's what happens with police. Generally, we only hear about 2 categories
Mhm.
of police officers. We hear about good cops and we hear about bad cops.
Mhm.
But there's a 3rd category that's very rarely talked about, and I'll get to that in a second. Usually what happens when a police officer does something that is questionable, and it looks bad to the public, and it is bad, the PIO, which is a public information officer in the police department, comes on. He's a media person. He comes on TV or the radio, or the police chief comes on and says, we found that the officer followed proper police procedure. He feared for his life, in order to justify his actions.
There's that fear again.
Yeah, exactly. And then later on, in the rare instance that cop is convicted in a public court, so he gets fired, he gets convicted, then the PIO comes out, or the chief comes out and says, well, in a department this large, you're bound to have a few bad apples. That's always the excuse. No, there are more bad apples than there are good apples. And I'll tell you why. We all know what bad cops do. They take bribes, they use excessive force, they do whatever they do, right? Deal drugs. And there've been countless cases of when they have confiscated, let's say, 10 kilos of heroin or cocaine. If that's what they report, there may have been a lot more. Or if they found $100,000 cash, they probably found $150,000 cash. They take some for themselves. These are bad cops, all right? A good cop will not do those things. But the good cop will turn a blind eye and not tell on the bad cop. And that's a problem. That makes the good cop complicit with what the bad cop did. Even though, you did not take your nightstick and beat the crap out of the guy for nothing, but you allowed your partner to do it, and you're not telling the higher ups about it. That makes you complicit.
Everybody needs to be held accountable.
Exactly. Just like, hey, the guy who drives the getaway car is just as guilty as the guy who goes inside the bank and shoots the teller. Okay? So one's bad, one's good? No, you both are complicit. All right? The third category. Now, why won't the good cops tell? Well, they have, police, as you know, have this what's called the blue code of silence. They don't tell on each other. They don't snitch. All right? The only snitches they like are the ones on the street who give them information.
Well, then you don't have anybody protecting your back out in the field.
Exactly. You get called to a situation and you get there and all of a sudden you're being fired on, you call for backup. Well, when backup hears over the radio, oh, that's Officer so-and-so, I'm not going to help him, he snitched. That's your punishment. They don't come, or they come very slowly.
So essentially, you need this sense of community to go about.
Yes.
Be able to police force.
There was a movie that came out before your time, but you should check it out. It's called Serpico.
Oh, with what's his name? Al Pacino.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a true story about an NYPD officer. Okay. The third category. Yeah, I just told you the honest cops. Okay. Good, bad, honest. Honest cops are the minority. I don't mean minority in terms of skin color. I'm talking about, fewer as opposed to greater. Because they will put their lives in jeopardy in order to be honest and report bad behavior of their fellow officers.
Wow.
All right. Serpico was one of those. He ended up getting shot, by his own fellow cops.
Well, that ends up being the narrative that if you end up going outside that thin blue line, then you're going to end up not so well off.
Do you remember a few weeks ago where, this wasn't a color thing, but it was during, the racial protests where this old white guy approached these cops and they shoved him and he fell backward and banged his head on the ground.
I did see that. Yeah.
You saw that. And then you saw all these cops come walking by him. He's lying on the ground unconscious. And one cop tried to bend over to check on him and the other cops moved him along. You see that? Go back and look it up. Go on YouTube or whatever. I don't know how you probably Google cops push old white man to the ground during protests. Watch it. It's only about 40 seconds long. Watch it. You're going to see him get shoved and he bangs his head on the ground. He's bleeding. He's unconscious. And about 57 of them go walking by. and one of them like walked over and leaned down to check on him, and two cops from behind picked him up and moved him along
Oh, geez.
because he was breaking that blue code of silence.
Oh.
And then those, if you remember, those police, all of them lied about what happened. They said the guy tripped, he stumbled and fell.
No.
And then all of a sudden, here's this video. No, he didn't trip and stumble. He was shoved by two of you guys. And so when those two guys that shoved him got suspended for investigation, all 57 quit. All 57 quit that division.
Oh, man.
That's the blue code of silence. All right.
That's
And
a very tribalistic mentality. That
yes. And so we need a mechanism by which police officers can report misbehavior by their colleagues without fear of ramifications. Okay, just like, you know, if a crime is committed in your neighborhood or whatever, you call the cops come, but nobody wants to talk to the cops because they're afraid of retaliation from one of the neighbors, you know, or the person who did it or whatever. So they, I didn't see anything. You know, yeah, you saw the whole thing, but you know, whatever. So what the cops do is they put out some tipsters anonymous, you know, some number you can call and just leave information. You don't have to leave your name, you don't have to identify yourself. Just give them the information and they will handle the situation.
That's a smart move.
Yeah, so that's for us as citizens. So, you know, we can call in and leave the information and provide a tip. Well, cops need the same thing. They need to be able to provide information on their fellow cops without the fellow cops knowing who did it. Because here's what's happening. You know, you have the brass up top in the management, right? You know, they started out on the street. And, you know, as they get seniority and pass these tests, they go from, you know, the regular cop to corporal, to private, to sergeant, to lieutenant, to captain, to major, colonel, and then chief. They move up the ladder, and now they're in the administration part of the police department. You know, they're not down on the street patrolling anymore. They're monitoring those people. When you go to complain about, you know, some cop, if you're a cop, it leaks, and it gets back down to the street level, and then everybody knows, you know, that guy, Officer so-and-so, is a snitch. Why do you think you shouldn't have cops investigating cops? Yes, you know, they're honest cops in internal affairs as well, but there are plenty who are not going to condemn their fellow cops, because 20 years ago, when they were down on the street patrolling, they were doing the same thing. So how are you going to bust somebody for using excessive force when you were doing it yourself 20 years ago?
You can't justify it.
You can't justify that. So you need an outside agency, a citizens review board or whatever, you know, that you talk to, and then let them make some decisions. Just like, you know, if you go, let's say you are a police officer or you're a doctor or whatever, and you're on trial for something, malpractice, if you're a doctor, or excessive force, you know, if you're a police officer. When you go to court, there's the prosecutor and there's the defense attorney. And they each get to ask the jury questions before the trial even starts. And what they want to do is they want to weed out anybody who maybe have some bias. So they ask the jury, are any of you all police officers? Have you ever worked for the police? Do you have any family members who are police, or a doctor, or whatever the case may be? Because they don't want a police officer on the jury if they're trying to prosecute a police officer, because there might be some bias there, right? Or if you're a doctor, you know, is anybody on the jury a doctor? Do you have a spouse who's a doctor, a kid, a mother, a father who's a doctor? Have you ever worked in the healthcare industry, whatever? Okay, you're excused. And then they bring another one in. So they have a total 12 people who are not related, you know, to this person. I don't mean biologically related. I'm talking about industry related.
I have a connection towards that specific occupation.
Exactly. So if you're going to have, you know, 12 people judge somebody who have no bias against that person or for that person, then should it be the same way inside the police department in internal affairs? You can have cops investigating cops. You know, they can investigate it, but have a parallel investigation as well of unbiased people.
I like that.
Yeah, so that needs to be done. And also, there is no national registry for police officers. So what happens is this: in the rare events that a police officer gets fired from the job, what does he do? He goes to another department and starts right back again.
Heard about this. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and his behavior has never been addressed. So he follows that same behavior. If he's shooting people, if he's beating up people, if he's taking bribes or whatever he's doing, that behavior continues because it has not been reformed. It has not been addressed. It's simply been fired. So he just moves on.
It gives a sense of those bad apples to continue their behavior.
Exactly. Just like some of these priests out there, you know, they abuse little kids, and then when they get called on it, what happens? You know, they don't go to jail. They get shifted to another parish. And they start the behavior, you know, they go across the country to another church and do the same crap. Now there is a sex abusers registry, right? So if you molest some kid down in West Palm Beach, and then you move to Palm Springs, California, and try to get a job at an elementary school or with the Boy Scouts, they're going to see your name on that registry. This dude's a sex offender. Nope, we're not going to hire him. Because that record will follow you. That's what we need for police. I mean, when you become a police officer, you know, you have a 007 license. That's a license to kill. And so, you know, you have to be held to higher accountability. A
much higher standard.
Exactly. You know, we can't be putting you back on the street. You know, I mean, we need to support law enforcement. We need them, and they need us as well. And so we have to work together. But we can't justify working together with law enforcement when they keep putting their people time and time again in different departments and not punishing them for it, you know, for that bad behavior.
Somebody needs to be held accountable, and there needs to be a big change, obviously. And I think that's what most of these organizations are calling for, and then they get misrepresented with the other things that are going on. You know, the more aggressive and more destruction related. Yeah, I hear you. Well, sorry about taking up a little bit more than we.
No worries at all.
It was very, very good talking to you. It was
my pleasure
meeting you, and a definite pleasure of ours. Yeah.
If anyone wants to find out more about what you do, or do you have like a release date for the book or anything like that?
No, hopefully by spring.
Okay.
By spring.
Yeah,
is there anywhere where people can find more about you, like online?
Yeah, DarylDavis.com. DARYL. Only one R. DarylDavis.com.
Awesome. And everybody check out the Accidental Courtesy documentary.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Daryl Davis.
Hey, well, please stay in touch. You know, maybe sometime in the future, let's do it again.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
This was fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care, y'all. Bye-bye.